It was supposed to be just another routine flight. Just another few hours in the sky, traveling from LAX to New York for a closed-door investment summit where men in suits exchanged numbers that didn't feel real anymore. Numbers that could feed cities. Numbers that could crush families. But for Jonathan Rhys, none of that felt impressive lately. When you've had it all before your 40th birthday, money, status, freedom, you start noticing the emptiness no one else can see. His private jet had been grounded unexpectedly for a mechanical check. No big deal. He could afford to wait. But his 9-year-old daughter, Emily, was excited. She'd never flown commercial before. To her, this wasn't a delay, it was an adventure. The world was still full of wonder in her eyes, something Jonathan had lost somewhere along the climb. They boarded early, escorted through the VIP lane, eyes following them like shadows. First class, window seat for Emily, aisle for Jonathan. She pressed her face to the glass, giggling softly at the slow movements of the luggage trucks. He opened his laptop. There were still a dozen pending emails, numbers blinking red, people waiting for his approval to move millions across continents. The usual. Mechanical. Predictable. And then something happened. A flight attendant, maybe in her late 30s, stepped closer. Polished but not performative. Calm, but with a presence that felt different. Her name tag read Anna. Her smile wasn't the kind worn by people trained to pretend they care. There was something almost maternal in the way she knelt beside Emily, asking her name, her favorite animal, if she liked flying. Jonathan barely looked up. At first. Until Emily laughed. Not a polite laugh. A deep, belly-full, unstoppable laugh. The kind he hadn't heard since before Lauren, his wife, left. Since the therapy sessions started. Since Emily stopped asking questions about why mommy cried every night or why daddy didn't come home for dinner anymore. Something cracked open in Jonathan. A pause, barely perceptible, like a thread snapping under tension. He looked at Anna again. Watched, silently, as she pulled a tiny pin from her blazer, a butterfly, golden, delicate. She placed it gently on Emily's shirt. "This one's for courage," Anna said softly. "You look like a brave girl." Emily's eyes widened like someone had handed her a secret. Jonathan's stomach tightened. Something about that moment didn't sit like kindness. It sat like memory. He closed his laptop slowly. Anna rose and walked down the aisle, offering warm towels, pouring champagne, smiling at tired faces. Jonathan kept watching her. Not in the way men watch women. But in the way someone stares at a puzzle that feels familiar, like a smell from childhood or a sound that yanks your heart backwards. He remembered someone. Years ago. A nurse in a hospital. The same calm. The same patience. He remembered his mother dying. Remembered the way that nurse handed him a cup of coffee at 17, without saying a word, just holding eye contact like she could see what he was trying not to feel. Why the hell was he thinking about that now? "Dad," Emily whispered, tugging his sleeve. "She's different, isn't she?" He looked at her. Really looked. Her eyes weren't just bright, they were alive. Sparkling with something fragile and rare. Trust. "Yeah," he said slowly. "She is." But what did it matter? She was just a flight attendant. Just another stranger in a long list of people he'd never see again. Still, there was a tightness in his chest that hadn't been there when they boarded. A low hum of something stirring inside him. Something off balance. The plane began to taxi. Emily gripped his hand instinctively. He squeezed it back, letting himself be present, just for a second. As the engines roared and the metal bird lifted from the ground, he realized he hadn't held his daughter's hand in months. Somewhere over Kansas, turbulence hit. A sharp jolt. Screams. Oxygen masks threatened to drop. People panicked. Anna was calm. She moved through the aisles like she belonged there. Reassuring words, steady eyes, strong posture. She reached Jonathan's row and placed a hand gently on his shoulder. Not asking permission. Not seeking thanks. Just anchoring. It'll pass, she said. Just ride the wave. The words echoed. Ride the wave. He used to say that to Emily when she was learning to swim. Used to whisper it in her ear before she jumped into the pool. Ride the wave, baby. Trust it'll hold you. He looked at her again, sitting beside him, unshaken now. Brave. Butterfly pin glinting under the overhead light. After the turbulence passed, something had shifted in the cabin. People breathed easier. Smiles returned. But Jonathan couldn't relax. His mind spun with quiet questions. Who was Anna? Why did she feel so familiar? Why had her words hit him like a stone in still water? And why, of all places, of all days, of all flights, had this moment, this woman, this small act of human kindness, hit him so hard? He tried to sleep. Couldn't. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Emily's laugh. Heard the way Anna said, courage. Remembered the nurse. The loss. The little things he never mourned properly. Hours passed. When they began descent, Anna returned. Kneeling again. This time not for Emily. For him. I just wanted to say, she whispered, your daughter's got a light in her. Don't let the world dim it. He stared. She didn't wait for a reply. She just stood up and walked away. And Jonathan Rhys, a man who had conquered markets, raised empires, and lost more than he'd admit, sat there in first class, blinking back something hot in his eyes he hadn't felt in years. The plane touched down in New York. Everything looked the same. But inside him, something was beginning to change. New York's air was thick that morning, not with fog or pollution, but with pressure. The kind of invisible weight that made people walk faster, breathe shallower, speak louder. Jonathan Rhys had always thrived in this environment. Deals were made in elevators. Trust was bought with signatures, and no one had time to look inward. That was the rule. That was the rhythm. And for years, he'd played the game better than anyone. But that morning, stepping off the plane with Emily's hand in his, something felt off. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't checking his phone. The old urgency, the hunger to dominate every hour, was missing. And in its place was a quiet discomfort. Like realizing your suit doesn't fit anymore, not because it shrunk, but because you've changed shape. Emily was humming to herself, her eyes fixed on the butterfly pin. She kept touching it gently, as if afraid it might disappear. Jonathan watched her with a strange mixture of awe and shame. How many moments like this had he missed? How many times had he handed her to nannies, tutors, teachers, outsourcing her childhood while he built a kingdom? They stepped into the private car waiting outside JFK. His driver, Tomas, gave the usual respectful nod but noticed the shift instantly. Everything all right, sir? Jonathan hesitated. Yes. Just tired. Tomas didn't pry. But the glance he gave in the rearview mirror wasn't the kind a driver gave to a boss. It was the look a man gives when he senses another man is breaking, but isn't ready to say it aloud. They drove in silence. Emily eventually fell asleep, her head on his lap. Jonathan watched the city blur by, skyscrapers jutting into the clouds like spears trying to pierce heaven. He used to look at this skyline with pride. Now it felt like a monument to noise. Cold. Mechanical. Unfeeling. His phone vibrated. Over 50 unread messages. A missed call from Martin Lang, his COO. Another from Deborah, his assistant. An urgent email marked confidential, with a subject line that read, investor threat, you need to see this. He didn't open any of them. He closed the screen, turned it over, and just stared at his daughter breathing softly. It had been years since he had allowed this kind of stillness. Years since he sat in a car and listened, not to music, not to podcasts, not to numbers or reports, but to the hum of the world outside. A city alive. People crossing streets. A girl with headphones singing aloud. A man in a wheelchair laughing with someone who looked like his nurse. There was something wildly human about all of it. and disturbingly unfamiliar. By the time they arrived at his penthouse in Tribeca, the sun was rising behind the buildings, casting long gold slivers across the marble floors of the lobby. The doorman greeted them with a polished smile. "Morning, Mr. Reese. Welcome back." Jonathan nodded. He noticed the look. The doorman saw something different in him too. Maybe it was Emily holding his hand. Maybe it was the fact that he hadn't barked into a phone since he stepped off the jet bridge. Whatever it was, Jonathan could feel the eyes. Quiet curiosity. In the elevator, he watched the numbers climb. Not digits. Floors. Status. Height. Distance from the ground. He lived on the 47th floor. Far enough to forget what life looked like at street level. Emily wandered into the living room like she always did, removing her shoes carefully, her voice soft and uncertain. "Dad, can I sleep in your room tonight?" He froze. How many nights had she asked that before? How many times had he said, "Not tonight," or worse, "Ask Maria, the nanny"? This time, he didn't hesitate. "Of course," he said. "I'll make space." Her eyes lit up like she'd been given permission to be close. To matter. Jonathan didn't know why the words hurt so much. Why something as small as letting her sleep in his room felt like undoing years of emotional damage. He watched her settle on the bed, curling into the blankets like a kitten. The butterfly pin still on her shirt. He sat on the edge and watched her for a long time. Until her breathing slowed. Until she drifted into whatever dreams children still get to have. And then he got up and walked to the kitchen. Poured himself a glass of bourbon. It was barely 7 a.m., but time didn't mean much anymore. He stared out over the city. And finally opened the email marked, "Confidential." Inside were details of a hostile investor movement. Lang had warned him for weeks. There were rumors of a vote to oust him from the board. Leverage being gathered behind closed doors. Shareholders losing faith. Numbers manipulated. Whispers turning into strategy. If he didn't act fast, he'd lose his seat. And with it, control of the empire he built. But Jonathan didn't feel panic. Not yet. He felt suspended. Somewhere between the man he was and the man he wasn't sure he wanted to be anymore. He thought about Anna. Her voice. Her hands steady during turbulence. The way she didn't flinch. The way she saw his daughter. Not as a burden. Not as a passenger. As a child. A light. A soul. He couldn't explain it. But he needed to see her again. And not for closure. For something deeper. Something undefined. The next morning, he did something completely out of character. He called the airline. Asked for the flight manifest. Said he'd lost a personal item, and a flight attendant may have picked it up. He lied. They hesitated. Policies. Privacy. Procedures. He pressed. Pulled favors. Used a name that still carried weight. Eventually, he got a name. Anna Dawson. Based out of Chicago. 15-year veteran. Known for exemplary service. That was all they gave him. But it was enough. He opened a search engine. Typed her name. Nothing. No LinkedIn. No Instagram. No recent interviews. She was a ghost. And yet, she had just become the most real thing in his life. Chicago. Jonathan hadn't been back in over a decade. Not since the acquisition of a failing logistics firm had pulled him there for a whirlwind 48 hours. 2 contracts, 1 boardroom fight, and a single empty bottle of scotch in his hotel suite. Back then, it had felt like just another battlefield. Another city to conquer, bleed dry, and abandon. But now, it felt different. Not because the streets had changed. Chicago still breathed with that sharp industrial edge, cold air slicing through alleyways, horns echoing off old brick. It was Jonathan who was different. He wasn't here for profit. Not this time. He hadn't told anyone he was coming. Not Lang. Not his assistant. Not even Emily, who was staying at her aunt's house upstate, watching old Disney movies and coloring butterflies on folded printer paper. He sat in the back of a cab, checking the note scribbled by the airline rep, a base address. Employee entrance. United Terminal 3. It felt absurd. He had funded aerospace deals worth hundreds of millions, and now he was tracing the steps of a woman whose job title he'd never noticed until 48 hours ago. The cab pulled up. He hesitated. What the hell was he even doing here? She didn't know his name. Hadn't asked for it. Had probably said those words to a dozen children before Emily. Maybe she just had that rare gift, knowing how to make strangers feel like they mattered. Maybe he had been a fool to think any of it meant something more. But he couldn't shake the way his daughter looked at her. Couldn't forget the exact way Anna had said, "Don't let the world dim it." Jonathan approached the side entrance. A security guard stepped forward, hand raised. "Employee only, sir." Jonathan smiled faintly. "I'm looking for someone. I'm not here to cause trouble. Her name's Anna Dawson. She's a flight attendant. I just need a few minutes." The guard squinted. "You know how many people ask for crew members every week? You, a reporter. No, a beat. I'm her passenger." Something in the man's face shifted. Curiosity overtaking protocol. He picked up the phone, dialed an internal extension. Waited. Jonathan's heartbeat thudded like it hadn't in years. After a moment, the guard nodded slowly. "She's on break. I told her someone's here. You've got 5 minutes. 5 minutes." It felt too short and too long at the same time. Anna stepped out through a side door a minute later, wearing a navy fleece over her uniform, hair tied back, no makeup. And yet, exactly the same. Calm. Present. Grounded. Her eyes met his. Not surprised. Just observant. "Mr. Reese," he said. "Jonathan Reese." She crossed her arms. Not cold. Just measured. "Is everything okay?" He cleared his throat, unsure for the first time in years how to speak. "I'm sorry to bother you. I know this is unusual. I needed to say thank you." She blinked, but said nothing. "I didn't realize it on the plane. Or maybe I did. But what you did for my daughter, that wasn't just polite. You saw her. You saw something I haven't seen in a long time. Maybe ever." A pause. Anna looked down briefly, as if collecting thoughts from the concrete beneath her feet. Then she said quietly, "Your daughter reminds me of mine." Jonathan's world tilted slightly. "I didn't know you had a daughter." "I had," she said. Silence opened like a wound between them. "I'm sorry," he said, and meant it. Anna nodded. "She passed away 5 years ago. She was 10. Leukemia. It started in her spine. Took her fast." Jonathan felt the air leave his lungs. All his years of boardroom negotiations, his mastery of control, his ability to read the room, none of it prepared him for the stillness in Anna's voice. There was no drama in her tone. No self-pity. Just truth, and the faint ache of something that would never fully leave. "I left my job for a while after that," she continued. "Didn't think I'd ever go back to the sky. But then one day, I helped a little girl who was afraid to fly. She reminded me of my daughter. She held my hand the whole way. When we landed, she hugged me like I had saved her. And I realized, maybe I still had something left to give." Jonathan swallowed hard. Anna studied him now. "Why did you really come?" He hesitated. Then the words came out in a slow unraveling. "Because I've built a life that looks perfect on paper. And I've been using that life to hide from everything that actually matters. My daughter, she's all I have. And I didn't even realize I was losing her until I saw her laugh with you. A laugh I haven't been able to give her in years." Anna's expression softened. Not out of sympathy, but something deeper. Recognition. You're not the first parent to forget how to see their own child, she said. But you might be one of the first to admit it. They stood there, on the cold sidewalk behind an airport terminal, surrounded by steel and fumes and distant engines. And yet, in that moment, there was a silence more intimate than any boardroom. Would you ever? He started, then stopped. Anna tilted her head. Would I what? He exhaled. Come meet her again. Emily. Not as a flight attendant. Just as you. Anna didn't answer right away. But her eyes said more than any yes or no ever could. I'll think about it, she said finally. I work again on Monday. Same route. LAX to JFK. Jonathan nodded slowly. We'll be on that flight. Anna gave a small, knowing smile. Then turned, walking back through the security door, disappearing into the sterile corridors of duty. Jonathan stood there a while longer, watching the door long after it had closed. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel alone. Monday arrived like an echo of something sacred, quiet, slow, and strangely heavy. Jonathan had barely slept the night before, not from anxiety, but from a kind of anticipation he didn't know how to name. It wasn't like preparing for a board meeting or a financial disclosure. There was no script, no strategy, no safety net. Just a gate number, a seat assignment, and a single hope, that she'd be there. Emily was buzzing. She woke up before the sun, dressing herself, smoothing her hair without being asked, clutching the butterfly pin like it was a promise. Do you think she'll remember me? She asked between spoonfuls of cereal. I think she never forgot you, Jonathan said, surprising even himself. He had barely opened his laptop that morning. Emails blinked like tiny alarm bells, Lang warning him again, lawyers requesting signatures, media tracking rumors of his potential removal. The vultures were circling. But he didn't flinch. Not today. They arrived at LAX 2 hours early. Jonathan didn't use the private entrance this time. No VIP escort, no backdoor boarding. He stood in line beside the other passengers, felt the weight of normalcy press against his expensive shoes and tailored shirt. Emily held his hand tightly, her eyes scanning the uniforms of every flight attendant who passed by. Then, she saw her. Anna. She was speaking to another crew member near the gate, back turned, unaware of the pair watching her. Emily's breath caught in her throat. Dad, she whispered. It's her. Jonathan knelt beside his daughter, placed a hand on her shoulder. You want to go say hi? Emily hesitated, suddenly shy, as if the magic might dissolve if she stepped too close. Then Anna turned, and their eyes met. Recognition bloomed instantly. She smiled. Not the professional, practiced kind. The real kind. The kind you give when you see someone who lives somewhere in your memory. Emily, Anna said softly, walking toward them, her voice carrying a warmth that broke straight through the morning noise. The little girl ran into her arms without hesitation. Jonathan watched, motionless, breath stalled, as his daughter hugged a woman she had only met once, yet trusted as if they had shared 1,000 lifetimes. Anna crouched down, held her, whispered something into her ear. Emily nodded, glowing. Then Anna looked up at Jonathan. Their eyes locked. There was no handshake. No awkwardness. Just silence. And something unspoken that stretched between them like a bridge neither one had dared to build until now. Same seats? Anna asked, rising slowly. Jonathan smiled. Wouldn't have it any other way. The flight was half full. A Monday morning lull. Businessmen typing. Couples dozing. A child crying in economy. But in seat 3A, Emily sat like a queen on a throne, her pin shining, her feet swinging above the floor, her whole body humming with joy. Jonathan sat beside her, glancing sideways at the galley where Anna moved with quiet efficiency. This time, he watched with intention. The way she helped the elderly man who struggled with his bag, not out of obligation, but instinct. The way she spoke to a nervous mother in coach, crouching beside her to make her feel heard. The way her eyes scanned constantly, not to control, but to connect. There was something sacred in her presence. Not in a mystical way. In a human way. She didn't save lives. She reminded people that their lives mattered. And that, Jonathan realized, was rarer than gold. About halfway through the flight, Anna appeared beside them again. "Can I borrow your dad for a few minutes?" she asked Emily with a smile. Emily nodded quickly, proud to be trusted. Anna gestured toward the galley. Jonathan followed her, feeling that same strange shift in the air, a gravitational pull that only she seemed to carry. They stood by the coffee station, hidden from most passengers, the low hum of the engines insulating them like a private room. "I didn't think you'd really come," she said. "I wasn't sure either," he admitted. Silence hovered. Then, softly, "I can't stop thinking about what you said," he continued. "About your daughter. About what you saw in mine. I used to believe that money was the shield. That if I built enough, controlled enough, insulated enough, I could protect her from everything that hurt me." Anna's face softened, her eyes steady. "But you're realizing now, the shield works both ways." He nodded slowly. "It kept things out. But it kept me out too." Another silence. This one deeper. "I know I've made mistakes," he said. "I've missed years I can't get back. But I want to change. Not in the way men say they'll change because they got caught or feel guilty. I mean really change. Be there. Learn her. Learn how to be human again." Anna didn't speak for a long moment. Then she reached into her blazer pocket. Pulled out another pin, this one silver, shaped like a small flame. "She gave this to me," she said. "My daughter. Before she passed. Said it was to remind me not to go cold inside." Jonathan stared at the pin. "I carry it every flight," Anna continued. "But it's not mine anymore. You need it more than I do." He started to protest. But she placed it in his hand, gently. And in that moment, it felt heavier than gold, heavier than his net worth, heavier than all the years he had spent building walls instead of bridges. "I don't know what happens next," he said. "No one ever does," she replied. "But if you keep choosing her, your daughter, you'll always be headed in the right direction." Jonathan looked back at his seat, saw Emily drawing in a notebook, legs crossed, tongue peeking out in focus. He turned to Anna. "Would you ever come have dinner with us?" She smiled. "Ask me again when we land." And just like that, she walked away, back into the cabin, back into her role, back into the quiet miracle of being fully present where she stood. Jonathan returned to his seat. Emily looked up, curious. "What did she say?" He smiled. "She reminded me," he whispered, "how to stay warm." They landed under gray skies. Rain tapped gently on the windows as the wheels met the tarmac, and for a moment, Jonathan wished the flight were longer. He hadn't realized how quickly peace could become a kind of addiction, how easily presence could start to replace pressure, how silence could feel more valuable than control. Emily was humming again. That same soft melody she'd sung after the first flight. Her drawings were scattered across her seat tray, half-finished butterflies, hearts, and a sketch of Anna that looked more like a queen than a flight attendant. She beamed as she showed them to her father, oblivious to the storm forming in the corners of his eyes. They waited until most passengers had disembarked. Anna remained near the cockpit, speaking with the captain. She caught Jonathan's gaze, gave a subtle nod, "Wait." When the aisle cleared, she approached them slowly. Rain streaked across the windows like quiet punctuation marks. "I don't usually do this," she said softly, glancing over her shoulder, then back at them. "But there's a diner a few blocks from here. It's quiet. Simple. I go there after flights sometimes when I need to feel human again." Jonathan didn't hesitate. "We'll meet you there." She smiled, then turned and disappeared into the jet bridge. The diner was old, the kind of place untouched by trend or time. Vinyl booths. Faded, checkered tiles. The kind of worn beauty that comes from surviving decades of stories. Anna was already seated by the window when they arrived. She was out of uniform now, plain sweater, jeans, hair down. She looked different. Or maybe she just looked more like herself. Emily slid into the booth without hesitation. "I drew this for you," she said, handing over a folded piece of paper. Anna opened it carefully. A butterfly, this one bright orange, flying above a field of stars. "I love it," she whispered. Jonathan sat opposite her. No tie. No mask. Just a man, stripped of all his shields, facing the unfamiliar feeling of actually being seen. They ordered pancakes and coffee. Emily talked about school, about the books she loved, about how she used to be afraid of planes. Anna listened like it mattered. Not in the way adults tolerate children, but the way only someone who has lost a child knows how to listen. Like every word is sacred. Eventually, Emily excused herself to the restroom. Jonathan exhaled, leaned forward. His voice was low, steady. "I've spent most of my life convincing people I was fine, that I was always in control, that nothing could shake me." Anna looked at him, silent. "But lately, I've been waking up with this ache. Like I've built a world too big for my own soul. And the more I fill it with things, the emptier it gets." Anna stirred her coffee. Then, "You're grieving." He blinked. "Grieving what?" She looked at him like the answer was obvious. "Time. The version of you that didn't know how much you were missing. The years you gave to things that never gave anything back." The words hit hard. Not like a slap, but like a mirror finally angled the right way. "I don't want to be that man anymore," he said. "But I don't know who I am without all of it." Anna's voice was barely above a whisper. "That's where it begins." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small photo. A girl, 10, with wide eyes and messy hair, smiling with 2 missing teeth. "My daughter." Her name was Sophie. Jonathan studied the photo with reverence. "She taught me," Anna said, "that we don't get to choose how long we have. Only how deeply we love while we're here." Emily returned and slid into the booth, unaware of the wait that had just passed between the adults. Jonathan looked at her. Really looked. Her fingers stained with syrup, her hair slightly tangled, her smile imperfect and real. And for the first time, he didn't feel like he was losing time. He felt like he was just beginning. The diner clock ticked slow. The rain outside had stopped, but its memory lingered on the windows, soft smudges where droplets once clung, like fingerprints of a moment that didn't want to let go. They stayed long after the plates had been cleared. Emily had fallen asleep in the booth, her small frame curled up against her father's side, one hand still loosely holding the butterfly drawing. Her breath was slow, steady. Jonathan held her gently, afraid to move, as if shifting even slightly might break something sacred. Anna sipped her coffee, now cold. Neither of them spoke for a while. Words had become unnecessary. There's a kind of silence that doesn't feel empty, but full, heavy with everything that's been said, and all that finally doesn't need to be. They were in that silence now. The kind that only exists between two people who have shared pain without demanding explanation. Jonathan finally broke it, his voice low, raw. "Do you believe in second chances?" Anna's gaze didn't move from the window. "I believe in people who fight for them. I don't even know where to start." "You already started," she said simply, looking at the child in his arms. "She's still reachable. That's more than most people get." He nodded, slowly, his eyes stinging again. It wasn't guilt this time. It was clarity. The difference was subtle, but life-changing. He thought of all the years he'd measured success in margins and valuations, thinking that building empires would fill whatever hole had formed in him as a boy watching his father leave. He had convinced himself that distance was strength, that affection was a luxury, and that presence could be bought with the right school, the right tutor, the right kind of silence. But presence couldn't be outsourced. And neither could healing. He looked at Anna. "I used to think I needed to protect her from the world. But now I see. It was me I needed to protect her from." She didn't soften at those words. She met them with the same quiet stillness she always had. Because she wasn't there to comfort him. She was there to witness his return. "I don't want to waste any more of her life," he said. "Then don't," she replied. Simple. Undramatic. but devastatingly true. He studied her for a long time. Her calm. Her strength. The quiet grief she wore like an invisible scarf, ever present, but never suffocating. You loved her so much, he said, nodding toward the photo of Sophie still sitting face down on the table. I still do, Anna said. Love doesn't end. It just changes shape. Jonathan looked down at Emily's face. Love, changing shape. He understood now. Not everything broken needed to be fixed. Some things just needed to be seen, held, carried, and that was enough. The following week moved differently. Jonathan cancelled 3 meetings, missed 2 calls, took Emily to school himself every morning, cooked dinner twice, badly, burned pasta, oversalted chicken. But she laughed through it all, as if just having him there made the mistakes taste better. On Friday, she left a note on his pillow, written in blue crayon. Dad, I like this version of you. Please don't go back to the other one. He cried in the shower that night. Not the clean kind of crying. The choking, shoulder-shaking kind that pulls something out of you didn't know was still trapped. That weekend, he took her to the park. They didn't bring a phone. Didn't check the time. Just fed ducks. Bought ice cream. Chased each other through the grass like fools. People stared. He didn't care. Lang called twice more, then finally sent a voice memo. The board's voting next week. They want to remove you. We're losing too much ground. The investors are panicking. If you don't fight back, they're going to take everything. Jonathan listened to the message once, then deleted it. Because something strange had happened. He didn't feel fear. He felt peace. For the first time in years, he wasn't trying to outrun anything. If they took the company, they'd be taking a ghost version of him. The real man was finally somewhere else. And he wasn't going back. He wrote a letter. Not for the press. Not for the board. For Emily. It said, I don't know what kind of father I've been in the past, but I know the kind I want to be now. You taught me that I was still alive. You reminded me of the beauty in the boring, the truth in the messy. I don't need the world to think I'm powerful anymore. I just want you to think I'm present. I love you. All versions. All days. Always. He placed it inside her backpack when she wasn't looking. She found it 3 days later, and taped it to her bedroom wall. Next to the butterfly drawing. And the pin. Anna didn't come back on the following Monday flight. She wasn't on the crew list. Jonathan asked the attendant. She checked the system. Transferred. Requested a change of base, she said. He felt a pang. Sharp, unexpected. Later that week, he found an envelope in his mailbox. No name. No return address. Inside was a photo of Sophie, different from the one at the diner. This one had her holding a paper airplane in a field. On the back, a handwritten note. Sometimes, when something hurts too much to carry, we offer it to someone who can carry it forward. Thank you for carrying her light. A. That night, Jonathan sat alone on the balcony. Emily was asleep inside, her window slightly open, soft music drifting into the night air. He stared at the skyline. He used to see power there. Now he saw stories. People. Pain. Beauty. Children dreaming behind lit windows. Lovers arguing. Someone crying over a sink. Someone dancing alone. The city hadn't changed. But he had. And maybe, that was enough. Weeks passed. He did lose the company. They stripped his name from the board, released a statement, praised his years of service. It made headlines. But he didn't read them. He was at a farmer's market with Emily, letting her pick vegetables for a stew she wanted to try. She waved a bunch of carrots in his face like a trophy, giggling. He laughed. Not like a man who lost something. Like a man who finally got something back. And sometimes, late at night, he'd sit in the quiet, holding the silver flame pin Anna gave him. A reminder not to go cold. He hadn't. He wouldn't. Because he now knew something he'd never been taught in boardrooms, never read in Forbes, never calculated in net worth. The smallest gestures can alter the course of a life. And love doesn't need to roar. Sometimes, it just needs to kneel beside a frightened little girl on a plane. And whisper, "You look like a brave one." If you liked this story, subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.